focusing on African development, human rights, and political economy. Dr. Fikriyesus received his PhD in sociology at Emory University, based in Atlanta, United States. He is also an assistant professor at the National College of Arts and Social Sciences in Eritrea, the college in Adikaya. His work focuses on human rights, political economy, and development. Recently, he published his new book titled Child Mortality in Eritrea, an overview of history and progress. This book is high-quality research on child mortality in Eritrea through a wide range of historical and current material, as well as an array of the latest, most up-to-date data. Not only does his book trace the history of child mortality in the country, it also unpacks the multifaceted factors that help to drive its success in reducing child mortality. And this includes high-level political will and commitment, steady advancement in women education and empowerment, expanded health and general infrastructure, as well as the improvement of access and services. To give you a glimpse of what other people thought about his book, I would like to give you a couple of quotes. His Excellency Arafine Berhe, Minister of Agriculture, had this to say about the book and the author. What an author, what a subject, a must-read book on the future of Eritrea. Also, Ambassador Sofia Tesma Mariam, permanent representative for Eritrea in the United Nations, commented saying this, this well-written and fact-filled book offers a glimpse into Eritrea's child care system, which places the responsibility of the welfare of the child on the entire community. Last quote I want to, which is probably my favorite one, by a lawyer based in London, Ruby Shandu. She had this to say, an exhaustive and comprehensive analysis of Eritrea's laudable success in reducing child mortality by Dr. Fikriyesus, a polymath and product of Awat Nahafash. Not only does Dr. Fikriyesus continues to research and write about Eritrean issues, especially around the Sustainable Development Goals, working with the Ministry of National Development, working with the Ministry of Information in Eritrea. He is also a proud member of, in English, the 32nd Zur Sawa. I don't know, Zur, like a round of Sawa. He's done both his military and national service in Eritrea. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Fikriyesus. And to take it.
Sal Hizatni, so if I start to cough or drink water, that's why. Eritrea, a personal reflection. Majamarta, Yakanyale, Shukran, and thank you. It's a real pleasure and honor and privilege to be here. And I would just like to extend my appreciation and congratulations to the organizers and all of the participants for being part of such an incredible and wonderful event. So thank you for that. Just a brief outline of what I will talk. I'll share a little bit about my background. I'll talk about why I decided to go home. I'll share a little bit about my overall experience. My latest book, Rahel, she pretty much covered it, but I'll touch on that. And then if there's time, we'll talk a little bit about Q&A if there's time for that. So I was born in Asmara, Wadi Mahramchara, and yeah, thank you. And so I'm the son of a single mother, mother of 5 children. And I always start the story about me or anything related to me with my mother, because everything I am and everything I would like to achieve and become is a result of her input and her values and everything that she instilled in me. So, although I was born in Eritrea, we moved to the West, and I grew up in Canada and later on in the US. And I like to share a story about my mother that reflects what I am, and it reflects a lot about what our mothers are, the proud, resilient, strong women that they are. So I was around 10 or 11 in Canada, and we were in class one day, and it was the day after an exam, a difficult exam, and the teacher in the school, she was well known, notorious even, for never having given any grade above a 90. La'li kab tesa, she never gave. So we were sitting in the class the day after this exam, and she was calling us up to the front one by one and handing back our exams. And I'm sitting in my desk and I'm watching as she's handing back all of the exams to the other students. And progressively, one by one, as the students are getting called, I'm getting more and more nervous. My heartbeat is racing, I start sweating, and this is because I see all of the students go up to the front, all excited, they get their exam back, and then their heads drop, they're really sad, they're really red. Finally, she calls me, Fikre, so I go up to the front of the class, I get my exam. And when I first look at my exam, I'm really shocked, and then I get really happy. And the feeling was, if you've ever paid for something in cash and you get the change back, it's much more than you're supposed to get. And I felt like that. I felt really happy, like, wow. And when I look up from the exam, I look at the teacher, and she smiles, she winks, and she gives me a thumbs up, so I know it's not a mistake. Gega yellen. And the exam score that I got, 99. Taysan Sha'ate. So, yeah, just like this, I was very proud, I was very excited, and we had a system in our school where you have to take your homework, your exams home, and you get them signed by your parents. And so that entire day, I carried the exam close to my chest, and I held it, and even I was showing it off to the other students. Finally, when I got home, usually my sisters, my elder sisters, would be the ones to sign for me, because as I told you, my mother is a single mother. She worked 2-3 jobs. Often we didn't see her at night. She would come late at night, and then I told my sister, you know, Izia, you will not sign this one. Izia ni mama ya, nis mama ka faramya. And so she said, Adoha lati kamatseya. And I said, no, kataseya mishet ajohi. So that night, I'm in the top bunk. My twin brothers, 2 of them, they're in the bottom bunk, and I couldn't sleep. I was just waiting and waiting, really excited to show my mother this exam. Finally, midnight comes, a little after midnight, my mom gets home, she opens the door, she throws the keys on the kitchen table, and she immediately sits down to go through the bills. What needs to be paid now, later, lichi, mai, zikulu, right? One by one. I race down the stairs, and I'm in my Spider-Man pajamas, my Batman slippers, really excited to show my mother this exam. I hand it to her, and my mother is first, she's very shocked because and I said, Mama, is he kafaram allahi, etc. Finally, she puts on her okale because she doesn't have great eyesight, and she takes out her big red pen, and she starts to go through the exam one by one. And this is a couple minutes because the exam is 3 to 4 pages. And the entire time, I'm standing in front of her, very excited because surely tzabah chocolate kagazania, gele kagazania, right? Finally, she signs the exam, she hands it back to me, and she says, Solomtai miti zekones. And so at first, maybe I was 10 or 11 years old. At first, I was very frustrated. But over time, I came to understand the underlying value of this message, the underlying importance of this message, that we should never be satisfied, we should never be content, that every day we should try to improve. Today is about being better than yesterday, and tomorrow we should try to be better than today. And I like to share this story because it's probably the most important lesson I've had. I've had the blessing, the honor to study in very important universities, attend big conferences. I've learned under some prestigious professors. But the most important lesson in my life, the thing that guides me in my life, is this lesson from my mother, a simple girl from Asmara. So, as I said, I grew up in Canada and the US. I had the blessing and the opportunity to complete my first degree as a double major in New York. I graduated with highest honors, highest distinction, and then I had another opportunity to continue on to do my master's and my PhD. Again, I graduated with highest honors, highest distinction, and in 2015, I made the decision to go back home and to work alongside. So I made the decision to go back home and work alongside my brothers and sisters and just serve my people. And since I've been back home now, I've had the honor, the privilege again of working in various areas, various departments. I've taught at the colleges, I've worked at the Ministry of Information, at the Ministry of Development, the Ministry of Agriculture. I've had the honor to be a part of different projects and initiatives. As Rahel just said also, I wrote a book. I've done a bunch of different research on different topics, publishing. But probably one of the things that gives me the most personal satisfaction, that has been the personally most important to me as a challenge was, as Rahel said, completing my military service, my military training as a proud member of the 32nd round. And so that's me, that's my background. And something that often comes up, and even before I went back home, and something that's come up a lot since I've been back home, is the question of why. Why would you go back to Eritrea? Why are you back in Eritrea? Why don't you leave Eritrea? And sometimes it comes from a negative way. Oftentimes it's an interesting way, or people are really, wow, you're like, such as this response. And this question never really sits well with me, and it always makes me feel uncomfortable, because every single day in our country, there are thousands and thousands of people serving their country, working hard, resiliently, humbly, yes? Moreover, does anybody know the first year of national service? Agelgulot Mas Jamira? Hadn't? Yes. July 1994 is the first round of national service. So there are people in our country that joined in 1994, and they are still serving their country today, proudly, quietly, humbly. So, in fact, there are many people, we just spoke with one, there are people here in this room that have been serving their nation for many years prior to 1994. So within this overall context, this overall picture, nate nishte nagari, abi nagar ikonen, within this big context. So it doesn't sit well with me, that question. I also often get the question of why from many people in the West, some of my former classmates, some of my former colleagues that I worked alongside. And they say, why would you go to Africa? Why would you be in Africa? But if you know the global situation, global development, Americans are going to Africa, Chinese are going to Africa, Indians are going to Africa. Africa is the place to be. So what is the big deal for an African and Eritrean to go back home, yeah? But if I'm going to focus on this question of why I went back home, perhaps the best way I can maybe respond to it is with another question. What does it mean to be Eritrean? And the response to that helps to encapsulate my answer, right? An Eritrean proverb states, Eritrawi, Hagrawi Meninet, Betweldi Zekones, Begibriyu. So to call ourselves Eritrean, to have a nation, we cannot forget all of the sacrifice, all of the bloodshed, all of the lives given for that. We have a privilege, an honor to call ourselves Eritrean, but that also takes responsibility, obligation, practical action, and work. And so when I put this all together, for me, the question is not why I went back, but why not? Why would I not go back? So a little bit now about my experience just back home, and I've had a lot of experience, 8, 9 years there, and positive, negative challenges, but if I could just share some in a nutshell. First and foremost, I've been able to learn, develop, and grow as a person, but also professionally, because of all of the challenges, all of the different responsibilities I've been given. Professionally, I'm a much better educator now. I'm a much better teacher now. I didn't do my PhD to be a teacher. I never wanted to teach in a college. Even I teach not because I love teaching, but because I love my people. But now I'm a much better educator. I'm a much better teacher. So that's one. I'm much better at research. I've developed a variety of soft skills and different types of skills. Teamwork, communication, leadership, delegation, decision-making, management. All of these have been developed, cultivated in all of the different roles I've been put in back home. So that's first. I've been able to learn, develop, and grow. Number two, I've been able to develop friendships that will last forever. Sometimes when we're in the West, we have these shallow friendships that are based upon shallow things, like Facebook-type friendships, or based on money. But the friendships I've been able to develop in Eritrea, because you can't just have a friendship based on money. There's not much money. You know, people give you their heart, yes? And so that's what I've been able to get. I'll share with you something else also. Eritrea, so Eritrea is the love of my life. My mother is the love of my life. And now Eritrea has given me my fiance, my soon-to-be wife, the third love of my life. So we'll be marrying in the end of this month, early next month actually, and she is a member of the Eritrean Defense Forces. She protects our nation, maintains our national sovereignty, protects our territory, and so what could be better than that? Yeah? Another important element or dimension about my experience back home is that I feel and I know that I'm a part of something much bigger than myself. In Eritrea, I do not have a job. I do not have a career. I have a calling. So I found my purpose. I know what I am here to do. Living, what I'm supposed to do. I have found my purpose. And every single day, I can see some of the impact that I'm having on my students, on my colleagues, in the different communities where we work. And so in the West, sometimes, we have financial rewards, and that's important, but sometimes people get stuck in this rat race. You get your salary, you pay your bills, and you sort of wonder what it's all about. But in Eritrea, I am part of a larger national struggle, and people before me have set the road, right? They've left their footprints, and now I'm leaving my legacy, I'm leaving my mark. And there's something that's very important. You don't always find that. And I've been lucky enough, blessed enough to find that in Eritrea. So that's also important. I don't want to romanticize it. I don't want to give you a false picture. Things are difficult, and I found a lot of challenges. I found a lot of difficulties, a lot of obstacles, but that's to be welcomed, and we should embrace that, because nothing good comes easy, yes? And because of those challenges, because of those difficulties, I'm much better now. And I often tell with my students that challenges should be embraced because it is through them that we get stronger, right? The example of the picture, Faham and Almaz, right? At their base, fundamental level, they're very similar. But Almaz becomes Almaz, diamonds become diamonds, because they undergo a process of extreme heat, extreme pressure, high intensity. And then they transform into something that is very valuable and precious. And so we should always welcome challenges. We should embrace those challenges, yes? And so, yes, I've had challenges. Yes, there are challenges, but I'm much better for them. Of course, also, prior to going back, since I've been back, even regularly, you're going to find people, and I've found many people that are naysayers. They're negative, doubters, haters, and what to do with them? But you know, we have our proverb, yeah, that like talk is cheap, right? Dogs bark, camels march. But be ready for that if you're thinking at all of going back home. People out in the West, people that don't want to see Eritrea doing good, people that don't want anything positive for Eritrea. Another important aspect about my time back home, and I think is very important and something I learned very early, and I just would love to share with anybody thinking about going back home or thinking just in general about back home, is the approach and the mindset we take to our nation and our people. So Eritrea and Eritreans, Hizbana, they do not need to be saved. Eritreans are a proud, intelligent, hardworking, creative, resilient people. So we have to, if we are thinking of going back, we're not going to save them. And if you have this mentality, you will not succeed, you will not be welcomed, you will not be effective. The approach we have to take is humility, modesty, roll up our sleeves, work alongside them. And taking that approach personally has been most effective to me. I roll up my sleeves and I say, Abgunnuhuma lahu, abwaginkuma lahu, and taika gaber nagaruni, baka. So when I reflect upon everything in the past 8 or 9 years, the good, the bad, the ugly, I can say without hesitation, without exaggeration, without any doubt, it's been the best and the most important decision of my life. Finally, this is primarily targeted towards many of the young people. You may be sitting there thinking about what can you do, what should you do, what may you do. And I can say the good thing is there's a lot. You can do a lot. First, I would recommend learn our history. We have an amazing history. We have an incredible history. Quite frankly, our history is unbelievable. It's movie-like, yeah? And it's really inspirational. So I'd recommend to the young people, you've already taken many of the steps by being here, by joining these, the YPFDJ, the Hijri. You've taken the first step, and I would just recommend you continue on that step. Read about our history, and also tap into the wealth of knowledge within our communities. Speak and engage with your family, with your mothers, your fathers, relatives, elders, and most importantly, perhaps, freedom fighters. We have this thing in our culture where people, they don't share, they don't talk about what they've done, what they've seen, what they've accomplished. And so sometimes a lot of those inspirational stories get lost. So extract it from them, get it out of them, and you'll be inspired. So first, learn our history. Second, learn our languages and our culture. We have an Eritrean proverb, and I translated it. A person who does not speak their language is like a bird without wings. A bird without wings cannot fly. It cannot thrive. And an individual, a community, a nation that does not maintain and retain and build and express its culture and languages cannot thrive and succeed. So that's very important. Number 3, again, to the young people mostly, maximize and fulfill your potential in whatever you do and wherever you are. Is it in art? We don't all have to be doctors, engineers, but whatever you're doing, try to maximize and fulfill your potential. It can be in art, in music, in dance, in volunteering, in whatever you do. And again, this is not actually a recommendation. This is an obligation, a responsibility. And why do I say that? Why is it an obligation, a responsibility? Every day, back home, there are people with very little who do not have very much, but they are trying to make the most with what they have. And so for those of us who have the blessing, the fortune to be in the West, to have access to everything at our fingertips, We cannot become lazy. We cannot become lackadaisical. We have to maximize it because there are people who would love to be in the shoes that we're in. Of course, give back, and Susie talked a little bit about it, but there's so much that you can do locally here, in your communities. If you're ever visiting back home, even you can do a one-day workshop. You know, there's so many things that you can do, fundraising, workshops, curriculum support, teaching, and of course, most importantly, be proud. This one might seem a little bit difficult right now. Francesca, the journalist in the morning, she spoke a little bit about it. Our young Bitseti, she spoke a little bit about it in her poem. Eritrea is the victim of a misinformation and a disinformation campaign, yes? And this is not something new. This goes back very many centuries to the time of colonialism and imperialism. There are geopolitical aims under this misinformation campaign. And one of those aims is for us to bow our heads and feel shame and feel that we're inferior. Eritrea is not perfect. There's good and bad, just like every other country, just like Italy, France, London, everywhere you go. But in Eritrea, they only focus on the negative so that we'll bow our heads, be easier to manipulate, control, and all of those political aims that they're after. So first and foremost, be proud. Finally, I would just like to share what Eritrea, how I choose to see Eritrea. If we think about a rose, say, and a rose is growing from concrete, there isn't soil. It's in an area where there isn't much sunlight, there isn't much water. And this rose is growing from there. Perhaps it is not as tall as a regular rose. Perhaps it's not as bright red, and its fragrance is not as sweet. Perhaps it has many thorns, and it's tilted to the side. If somebody came across this rose and sees this rose, are they going to talk about the thorns? Are they going to talk about how it's not as tall as a regular rose? Or are they going to say, wow, this rose, it's growing from concrete, without soil, without much sunlight, without water. And for me, Eritrea is the rose that grew from concrete. So if we think about it, we've been the victim of 80, 90 years of external intervention, foreign meddling, outright wars. We are the victim of illegal sanctions, economic coercion, this media campaign that I've been telling you about. We're located in a region of the world that is the most vulnerable to climate change, even though we have contributed the least to climate change. We are faced with famine, drought in our region, hostile neighbors. Despite all of these challenges, our people keep their heads up. They work hard. Yes, our nation stumbles, but they keep moving forward. Our country tries to provide free education, free healthcare, something that even some of the most wealthy countries in the world do not do. So this is something to keep in mind, yes? The rose that grew from concrete. Finally, just if I could talk about the book for 2 minutes, child mortality in Eritrea. And so when we think about the death of a child, this is the greatest tragedy in life, the greatest tragedy in a society. We expect people to be born and live a long life. And when they die very soon, it's something very terrible. This tragedy has been something that has been highly prevalent, highly common for very many centuries. So across the centuries, anywhere from 25% to 50% of children would die during birth, shortly after birth, or before the end of childhood. However, in the past several centuries, and especially in the past 50 to 100 years, we've seen massive improvement globally in the rate of child mortality reduction. Again, however, despite this global improvement, there are parts of the world where child mortality is still far too common and is still far too prevalent, predominantly sub-Saharan Africa. Yet, within sub-Saharan Africa, there is some small pockets of success and some bright stories. And one of those bright stories is Eritrea. You may not know, but in Eritrea, we used to have among the highest child mortality rates anywhere in the world. And now we are at the global average, and we are among the best in all of Africa. And so what my book tries to do is tries to trace that entire history of child mortality, going back to the Italian colonial era until modern day. It tries to trace that entire story and then tell what are the factors, what are the explanations for this great improvement. And if I can just tell some of the significant points, first, it contributes, what my book does, it contributes to the global literature. Around the world, there's been a lot of books, a lot of research done on child mortality. So we know about child mortality in Sweden, in Italy, in Brazil, all over the world, in China. And now what my book does, it puts in the Eritrean perspective into that larger global conversation, number one. Number two, my book offers valuable insights and lessons, particularly for other nations. I just told you about some of the challenges Eritrea has faced. Yet despite those challenges, it's been able to make a lot of this success. And its success is not based upon millions and millions of dollars. Its success is not based upon foreign consultants, foreign experts coming in and putting the solutions. Our success is locally driven, locally owned, and it's carried out by Eritreans. So it offers a lot of useful insights and lessons for those people. Number three, I cannot see, but it helps to change the narrative about Eritrea, or at least broaden the narrative. Everything in the media about Eritrea is very narrow, it's very shallow, and it's guided by non-Eritreans. This book is written by an Eritrean working in Eritrea alongside other Eritreans. So number three, it broadens that discussion about Eritrea. It's not only about war, our country, it's not only about sanctions, it's not only about Wayana. We have a lot of other positive stories going on in our country, so it broadens that discussion. Number four, what my book helps to do is also serve as a foundation for future research, future work. Other people, my students, some Hijri, some young people, can take a look at this work and perhaps build upon it and take it to the next level. Finally, this thing is off here, so I can't see. Okay. Number five, it's for a good cause. All of the books sold, the funds from it are not going into my pocket. They're not going into my account at the Hagarawi Bank. They're going to the orphans at the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare. So the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, it does a lot of good work with these orphans. They work quietly, often unrecognized, and so just my students, they work there, and this is something that I thought I could help to support them. So all of the things, I'm not getting rich from this. It's just going to buy clothing, equipment, books, toys for these children who, based upon the idea of social justice in our country, nobody should be left behind. So, thank you, Yekenyele, shukran.
Jirambesa, jirambesa.